Hello, everyone. So sorry about the late start. A minute, not too bad. How is everyone today? I see that the comment section, the chat section is already exploding. See. Hi, Julia. Nice to see you. Have you been on before? I don't know if you've asked any questions before. Uh, According to this, my stream health is poor. Huh. Tell me if you guys are having troubles with the connection or the stream health, if it's like looking slow or laggy or something. Let me know. How can I get my tone to resonate in my face forward? Oh, I like that question. There were a few things. As you can see, I'm at the piano today because I figured this would actually be a better, more logical place for me to sit during these live streams. So I have a few videos on this topic. So we're not necessarily placing our voices per se, right? But we do want this sense of acoustic energy here. When we do that, we generally just don't feel as much work in the throat. It's not that there isn't resonance happening there either. But some of my favorite tools are, I like the NG, for example. It's very good. It gets that feeling of really strong acoustic energy in through the nose because all of the air and resonance are being filtered out through the nose. So just a nice buzzy, and then taking it from there, any vowel, it doesn't really matter, and trying to get that feeling of that energy, that acoustic energy inside that same space, even though the soft palate has gone up and the nasal port is mostly closed or completely closed, depending. So I love that one. I love doing just nice, energized, twangy hums. And then again, alternating between vowels and the hum is also really good. And feeling that sense of everything still feeling like it's very energized here. I have a video also of, I just put lipstick on, great, of an open mouthed hum. So you make like the vowel that schwa vowel in the word luck, with your tongue and your mouth, and then you cover your hand with your mouth and you continue to make the same sound. So here you're still closing you're still opening the nasal port, sorry, but now you're kind of blocking off the mouth space and then removing the hand. So I'm doing it that way. Silly allergies. Lipstick in my hand. I know I have tissues here. All right, my bench is so creaky too. All right, getting rid of that. There's also that, and I have a pencil here. I actually like being in this space better because I can actually reach my tools. That's really good. I've talked about that idea of over the pencil and under the pencil. I know Melissa Cross uses this, and Renee Fleming has used it in the master class as well. But you take the pencil and you gently set it between the upper and lower sets of teeth. And then you imagine the tone going over the pencil as opposed to under the pencil. And it will sound as though the vowel itself is changing. Think the same vowel, but you want to think this sense of it going under. And when you do that, you get this really dull, dark sound. Okay, you're picturing, it tends to bring everything down. And then if you picture the sound, the tone going over the pencil, and then you get that that set of higher overtones in the sound. It's not exactly feeling the resonance going forward per se, but the result, the symptom of getting the sound over the pencil, so to speak, and it's really mostly imagery, is that you will tend to pick up on some of those higher overtones and you will start to feel a little bit more of the resonance inside the face. I do have several videos on this topic, so I may have missed some of the exercises, but just simple M's, N's, NGs. Some singing teachers don't like using those sounds because they feel like it can lead to nasality after the fact. That has not been my experience. I've never really worked with a student who did a lot of NGs and M's and such and had troubles closing the nasal port after that. So, you know, as long as you're able to differentiate between the nasal sound and the non-nasal sound, I think you'll be okay. Let's see. Hi, Matt. Nice to see you. Good. You're just saying hi to each other. Yes, please do chat amongst yourselves. Just keep in mind that it's a little hard for me sometimes to like follow what you guys are chatting, and it makes it a little harder for me sometimes to figure out which comments are questions and which ones are just you kind of chatting. See, just a hunch, Julia, but since I'm a bass singer, they say that singing with your mask helps with resonance. Then I don't know how it worked for a female voice. So, see, what do you mean singing? Oh, I'll answer that question. So, Julia, when we talk about singing into the mask is like you imagine there's an imaginary mask, almost like that, the theater mask that you see on the walls, the two masks. This idea that this is your mask, this hard, bony surfaces of the face. And a lot of singers feel like when they're getting things right in terms of shaping the vocal tract, they get a lot of sense of resonant energy in that the bony structures of the face. That's your mask area. A lot of singers will feel it in here and in the cheeks. Some will even feel it in the forehead and sometimes in the higher range. That's all it really is. They call it mask resonance. And obviously, the bones themselves are not resonators, they're just conductors of resonance. So, what you're experiencing there with any kind of vibration is really just a symptom of things being shaped a certain way. And when you have that feeling of it being here, it generally alleviates the feeling of work happening inside the throat, even though, yes, that's where it's actually happening. So that's all it really means. I love twang as well, Julia. I love using that just bright wah, wah, getting that, like feeling that sense of acoustic energy kind of being there as opposed to out of here. And again, yes, I know that there's resonance throughout the vocal tract. But yeah, I love to use that wah, wah, that kind of twangy hum. And that can really help it'll also help with the glottal closure, getting the vocal folds together, and again, highlighting some of the brighter overtones so that you get a little bit more bite in your sound, a little bit more ring, a little more cut. And then you tend not to, I find, this is my experience, and I think there's a lot of science to support this, that when we have those higher overtones present, we tend not to push and force as much. And so it can also be kind of protective of the voice a little bit. Just so you know, I am doing, some of you know this already and may have already signed up, but I do have the next set of online workshops coming up on Thursday and Sunday of this week. Next Sunday, sorry. And it's going to be on twang this time around. So I'm really excited about that because twang is one of my most favorite vocal topics. And it has been so incredibly helpful in my own singing, and I love to use twang. Regardless of what style you sing in, I think twang is a really important component to singing, so in healthy singing. All right, Matt, I mean like the nasal passages, but like I said, that probably works best. Yeah, and you know, this topic came up in one of my on one of my other videos in the comments section, and somebody was asking them what my views were on whether or not we should sing with the nasal port slightly open with a slight bit of nasalence, nasal resonance in there. And there is evidence to support the use of a slight opening of the nasal port, especially through the passaggio, to ease that transition, because it just creates a really positive interaction between the vocal tract resonance and the vocal fold vibration. But, you know, not everybody agrees. Not everybody really wants to hear perceptible nasality for sure. But even Johann Sundberg and his colleagues are currently working on research on the nasal resonance and such, and its effect on the passaggio. And I think it's just, there's a lot of disagreement, and I think it's because, generally speaking, perceptible nasality in the tone is considered not to be, for most styles of singing, to be a pleasant sound, professionally desirable, or what have you. So I think that there's always that concern about adding the nasal resonance, because, but it's like, I guess it kind of happens on a continuum, right? We can add a tiny bit of nasal resonance, and I definitely find with certain sounds, adding a tiny bit of nasal port opening can indeed make it easier to work through certain areas of the range. And then, but then it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a perceptible nasality. So it's not like a honky, Fran Drescher kind of sound. It doesn't have to be taken to that extreme. So I think that there's a little bit of gray area. We can choose not to, or we can choose to have that. But, so Matt, yeah, it's not a bad thing as long as I think it's not producing an unpleasant tone. And there is the risk with nasal resonance if there's too much of it, if it's perceptible nasality, is that you actually thin the sound a little bit. It makes it more difficult for your voice to carry, even though it's augmenting those higher overtones. It actually makes it more difficult for your voice to carry because while you are adding nasal formants, you're diminishing or even completely getting rid of the oral formants, and the oral formants tend to be, we'll say beefier. They tend to be a little louder, generally speaking. Not to get all complicated with that stuff. It's more complex than I'm making it out to be, but generally speaking, you don't want to thin the tone too much with nasal resonance, but a tiny bit could be beneficial. And we'll talk in the online workshop on twang about the difference between, or being able to separate twang from nasality, because a lot of people hear really strong pronounced twang and they assume that there is resonance in the nasal passages when in fact there isn't. So I can produce a sound that's very bright, very twangy, and I've done this with students before, and they'll think it's coming through the nose, and I'll pinch my nose, and there won't be any difference in the sound at all. And that's because twang isn't actually made in the nose, and we'll talk about that more at the workshop. So please, if you are interested in this topic, sign up for the workshop. I will include information later on about that. And you can check out singwise.com/workshops. That should be the URL for you guys. Let's see. I don't know if it'll work for you. The streaming's good for me. Oh, good. Okay. It looks like it's yellow again. It was green for a while. It was red for a while. So I don't know what's going on. Hi, Nicholas. Nice to see you. Okay. It's not showing my video here yet. There we go. I just got a little, I don't know if you heard the noise there. It just said that my streaming thing is not working. So that's not good. I don't know what's happening there. I'm like right near the little, I don't even know what it's called, little Wi-Fi guy. Oh. All right. See, I think it's not a good sign when you feel sore. Again, it means you're overdoing it. It means whatever you're doing is not right. So what's happened is probably that somewhere along the lines, your voice has been trying to tell you that the way that you're singing is not quite right. Something's a little bit askew, but you've pushed past that for the sake of trying to extend your range. So I've said this many times before, and some people have disagreed with me that they feel it's the safe way and that you don't accomplish anything by being safe. I think that applies to only certain things in life. But when it comes to your voice, I think that if you're going to work on extending your range, you have to do it the right way. So I would rather see that, somebody balancing out the middle and upper middle portions of their range first, and making sure that everything is in balance, that the voice is operating efficiently and it feels good and it sounds good, and gradually adding a semitone, and tweaking that semitone, rather than what a lot of singers do is they just keep going and they just keep going thinking that, okay, if I just exercise this part of my range, then it's going to virtually guarantee that I'm going to eventually get better at it. But oftentimes you end up sore, you end up actually developing habits that have to be undone later on. So in the grand scheme of things, you're better off being patient and growing that range little bit by little bit. Yeah, patience is kind of hard, I know. Because I look at it like when you work out at the gym and you know how you get sore. Yeah, so that's a little bit of a different thing. So you are not using muscles in the same way as you do in a workout. When you are working out, you're actually intentionally overworking those muscles so that, and my mind is just not working today because I know the terms in my head. Got this written in a chapter too. But you're not exercising the muscles in the way, you're not releasing the same, chemicals and stuff. These are tiny, tiny muscles, and we don't build them to bulk them up. That's the important thing we have to remember. Even if we're talking about getting a stronger voice, The stronger voice that we're achieving is actually a combination of several factors, but it's not muscle bulk. We're not bulking up these little tiny, tiny intrinsic laryngeal muscles. We're working on coordinating the breath and the glottal closure mechanism and the resonance. It's all three of those things, plus what goes on up here, that really play a role in whether or not our voices grow in power, for example. So I think again that principle of working out at the gym doesn't really apply to singing in the same way, because singing is about coordination. It's about getting all the little ducks in a row, so to speak, technically, so that you can actually produce the kind of sound that you want to produce. And it's if I'm working with a student and I hear some sort of a new student and there's this limitation in the upper range, sometimes it's this little tiny technical adjustment and all of a sudden the singer has a whole octave. So it's not from working out more, it's not from building that muscle bulk, right? That's from tweaking how that singer is using his or her instrument. Hopefully that makes sense. Oh, you're very welcome, Julia. Do I have a small group today? Oh, I do have a very small group today. Normally, you guys have got about 3 times this many people. So that's okay. It might be more manageable in the comment section. I had a question up at the top. I don't know if you saw it. Oh, all right. I'm going to go zoom back at the top. Let's see. The nasal passages. Oh, I don't see it, Matt. Can you please retype it? Oh, you know what I did? I didn't change it to live chat. It's just on top chat, so maybe I missed. See, I did. I missed stuff, I think. Oh, dear. I think I'm just a hunch. Yeah, actually, Matt, I don't see it. I don't see it. Please type it in again, okay, and I'll try to answer it as soon as you do that. Or, well, as soon as I get down there. Oh, Marlfox. Hello. That's a new name I'm not familiar with, so welcome. Matt, a question about AGT. Yeah, ask me please again, Marlfox. I have a question relates to strain. I have some pain when I swallow, and also if I touch my hyoid bone, there's a little sore knot there. Is that from throat strain or tongue strain, if you know? Well, I don't know offhand. I could probably figure that out by palpating and just kind of getting a good feel for, what's going on with the thyrohyoid space, the space between, the thyroid cartilage and the hyoid bone. And then I would also feel for what's going on in terms of the tensions here, the suprahyoid muscles underneath the chin. They make up the floor of the mouth, and the fibers of the tongue muscles feed into them. So these muscles here are involved in jaw and tongue. So it could actually be a combination of things. I wouldn't know offhand. I did do that workshop last week on dealing with tongue, jaw, and neck tensions. So one of the things that you can do to find out, to kind of diagnose what's going on, is to take your thumbs and you can slide down and try to find that hyoid bone, right? I have to swallow when I do that. I just put my fingers in here. Actually, it's the easiest way for me to do it is to kind of do this. And I feel that little bone kind of moving there. And there she is. Is to go above and then to put a little bit of pressure. Actually, I would just do it this way. Put a little bit of downward pressure on the hyoid, a little bit. You're kind of pushing in and down very gently. And then you're going to kind of just lift your head. And then what you're doing there is you're trying to stretch that muscle, the muscles here, that muscle, several muscles, but I would actually move your hands at different points to focus on the different suprahyoid muscles. But when you do that, if you feel an intense stretching, an intense tenderness there, there's a good chance that it has something to do with the hyoid bone, the suprahyoid muscles, where they attach into the hyoid bone. But then it could also be tongue root tension. And sometimes feeling for how much space there is with the hyoid bone and the thyroid cartilage. It's kind of hard to know. It's all relative to you and your individual anatomy in your body. So that's what I would be doing if I were working with you one-on-one, is kind of monitoring that and seeing, does the hyoid bone sit really high? Is that normal for you, or does it sound and appear to be more of an issue that the tongue and the suprahyoid muscles are so tense that they're keeping that hyoid bone in a heightened position? So I would be, I would do a little detective work I guess, apart from working with a singing teacher on this. Um, so it could be tension. I don't know if you're somebody who has a lot of resting tension. It's funny to call it resting tension because it's not resting at all. I have a lot of resting tension in my tongue and jaw. I hold all my tension there. And I will catch myself at times just being really tense, my tongue pressed into the floor of my mouth, for example. And when I do that, I feel like it makes, like, I start singing practice from a really bad place. So if you're already starting from a place of a lot of tension, a lot of resting tension, then it may just be that, you know, how you're singing on top of that is just exacerbating because now you're using your voice even more. So yeah, it's hard to know. It's hard to know offhand, but I would really just monitor this space. I would I would do things like swallow it to see what happens. Does the hyoid bone move up separately from how much space is there? Like how much space does the space increase or decrease when you swallow between the thyroid cartilage, that Adam's apple, and the hyoid bone? I would check for tensions through here if things feel really really tight. When you're breathing, if you put your thumbs there underneath the chin, actually here you're touching the digastric muscles, but there are also other muscles here that are part of this complex of suprahyoid muscles. If you put your thumbs right here and you just breathe in and out through your nose, do you feel things moving or tensing up in here? And then I would do the same thing and breathe in and out of your mouth. Do you feel things tensing up in here? If you do, then there's a chance that you have some residual tensions through there, just resting tensions. And then I would do things like phonating and see what happens. If the floor of the mouth like just kind of drops, or you feel a lot of downward pressure exerted by those muscles against your thumbs, then there's a good chance that there's a lot of tension up in here that you're holding that is probably leading to the strain, because when those muscles are tense, right, they're short. That means that they're hiking up the hyoid bone. And depending on what you're trying to do with the larynx to try to create the sounds that you're making, you could be producing this really nasty tug of war between the suprahyoid muscles that hike the hyoid bone up and the infrahyoid muscles that pull the larynx down, right, the hyoid bone. So that tug of war can definitely lead to strain. So learning to be able to separate the functions of the tongue, the jaw, and the hyoid bone is very important. I do have at least one video on that topic of separating them. I think it's more than one. So check that out. So you're looking for independence of function, and then learning to be able to achieve that independence of function, and learning to be able to separate, the laryngeal height from what happens with the tongue, for example, is really important. Let's see. I had a long singing session, and I'm still a noob, so I may have had some bad form. Yeah. So when you are new, Marl Fox, with singing, I would tread a little bit more cautiously with your voice, I guess I would say. Oh, hi, Janet. Sorry, I just got distracted. Janet is our moderator, so nice to have you here. So I would tread a little bit cautiously with a newer voice. Not every voice is delicate. Not every voice is starting from the same place. You have to kind of feel and listen to what your body's telling you. And if you see and feel any little warning signs, any little red flags popping up, pay attention to that. Stop, rest, come back to it later. Or change up what you're doing if you know how to do that. But if you're new, you may not yet know exactly what to do to kind of tweak things. That's where, again, you should really meet with a singing teacher. So let's see, what you're saying. Yeah, so that's the other thing too with new singers is I would say start off practicing in shorter spurts and give your voice that rest time in between in case you aren't doing things 100% correctly. It gives your vocal instrument some recovery time, which is really, really important. It needs recovery time. It doesn't necessarily need a week of vocal rest. It shouldn't if it does, and that's a real concern. But yeah, so I know you're probably really enthusiastic and you're thinking, oh, the more I practice, the better at it I'll get, but it's not necessarily the case, and that's not actually how practice goes. It's more about quality than quantity, generally speaking. And with the vocal instrument, it often is best to kind of, let's say you practice for an hour, it's often best to break that up into 2 half-hour sessions or even 3 20-minute sessions depending on what your schedule is like. Nicholas, you're so very welcome. I get all these little things from YouTube popping up. Welcome to live chat. Remember to guard your privacy and abide by our community guidelines. Okay, I will. See, I'm going to sing with a group of 4 people. I want to know how to sing an octave higher, like if they are hitting F5. Hitting F5, how could I sing? An octave. Okay, so that's only from F5 to F sharp 5 is only half step, but are you meaning if they're singing down like F4, you're wanting to sing like the F5? Because the 5th octave is high for most guys, not impossible. I have a lot of male singers who sing up in the 5th octave. But you know, that might be, it depends. I mean, you probably, depending on your voice type and where you're at technically, it may be more like a falsetto sound. I have a couple videos on extending your range, really more so like focusing on head voice, and I've got some videos on vocal strain as well. I've got 2 or 3 of those videos. You know, doing like lip rolls, tongue trills, those sirens are great because they teach you to access the thin edge function of the vocal folds. They really drop a lot of the vocal weight. When you're singing high, I emphasize twang, like more twang, and go into that like thinner, narrower space when you're singing contemporary styles. When you're singing classical, it's I recommend the opposite. But I always say kind of go into that space, because we usually, what happens, and even in classical singers, is we want to spread the sound. And when we spread the sound, the vocal folds start kind of vibrating loosely, so to speak, and there's loose air passing by them, and we tend to start kind of changing the shape drastically to try to compensate and try to make room for that pitch, I guess. And we do some weird things. So sometimes thinking more in terms of going into that smaller space and letting it start from there. You can definitely build and grow that, but when you get that twang, you get that really nice bright resonance, and that can help your voice carry so much more effectively. So then you start to work more efficiently, and you start working smarter, not harder. So I have a feeling you're probably like most people, when you get to the upper range, you push and you try to make that sound really big at first, but start with that really small space and then let it grow from there as it feels comfortable, but don't engage extraneous muscle to make that happen. Don't push a lot with the breath to make that happen. Everything in balance. You increase the efforts here, then you increase the efforts here at the same time. You might have to do a little bit of shifting here. You might have to readjust your mouth shape. Usually the louder we get, the more open our mouths are, the lower our jaws are. Cockney Rebel, hi, nice to see you. No, you are good. Don't worry about being late. What have we missed? Talking about strain and talking about nasal resonance and all that good stuff. You can just go back and listen to it. Nicholas, and I want to know, because whenever I'm with my vocal teacher, I'm glad you have a vocal teacher, whenever I'm hitting a note, she knows exactly what note I'm hitting. Are you able to do that, and how is she able to tell? All right, it is entirely possible that she has what some call perfect pitch. Most of us have absolute pitch, in the sense that we can kind of reference pitches based on other pitches, or we can kind of get a ballpark figure of what the note is. Somebody who has perfect pitch is somebody who actually can listen to a vacuum cleaner and know exactly what frequency that vacuum cleaner is singing at. So it's possible that she has it. I've worked with 2 students who actually have perfect pitch. I know they don't like that term, perfect pitch. So it's possible that she has that. I know for me, I have absolute pitch. And when I'm singing a note, I can usually tell when, for example, I'm singing a C. I can tell when I'm singing a D. There are certain notes in my scale where I know exactly where I'm at, especially if I'm in certain coordinations. And that's just based on how things feel and how things sound, timbrally to me in particular. So I know how my C feels. And with my students, when they work with me, I'll say long enough, but it's usually, you know, maybe a couple months, I really get to know their voices really well. I can do the same thing with them. So they'll be singing something even a cappella, and I'll be like, oh, yep, yeah, you were singing a G there. And it's not because I have perfect pitch. It's just that I get to know their voices and I get to know the timbre of their voices and how their voices operate and function within certain pitch ranges. So it could be one or the other. Yeah. Chatting. All right, Nicholas. Allergies. All right, well, we're doing really well for time. It's nice that it's a small group today. It makes it more manageable. All right, I can hit a C6, but it's a bit uncomfortable. But I can hit a B5 in mixed voice. Vocal teacher's the best. Yay! Good. Yeah, so it sounds like you've got a higher range because Cockney Rebel also has a higher range. So you guys are, maybe um, relatively comfortable in the same pitch range or something. So, yeah, just take it easy. Like, just be smart about how you do things. Be very intentional about how you're singing up there. It's really important. I want to thank you, by the way, Karyn, for suggesting that I learn to work more on my chest voice register. Oh, yay! Yeah, that's the fun thing with higher voiced singers, such as yourself. There's, excuse me, there's often the tendency to want to stay in that higher tessitura. It's just easier, more efficient. It's our comfort zone. Oh my gosh, my my allergy stuff. I've been off of all medications for a long time now, like a month and a half, and I haven't really noticed much of a difference in terms of things being on or off. So I'm like, I'm not going to take medications if there's really no difference. So yeah, so with higher voiced singers, I swear I'm ADHD or something. They want to sit in a higher tessitura, but in working the lower range, they actually build strength into that higher range. And just like, the opposite for higher voiced singers, or for lower voiced singers, when they work the upper range, they actually build more, not security, but more balance, I guess you could say, into the lower range. So they're not weighing everything down too much. So it's really important, regardless of your voice type, to sing in all areas of your range, to exercise that. Does it mean, as a higher voice singer, that you're going to be spending an exorbitant amount of time in chest voice? No, that's probably not the healthiest thing to do. It's kind of like you go there, you have your little workout, and then you go back home. And that's what you should be doing. But yeah, I'm glad to hear it worked. I'm so happy with that. It's coming a lot stronger. Yep. F5s are easy. Awesome. Nick, look up. Thanks for the response. Yes, I have a lot of tension and larynx rising, some resting tension as well. Do you recommend ice or heat externally to help the knot heal? So you probably need massage and stretch is anything. I mean, it's kind of a weird place, to be honest. I wouldn't necessarily do ice. If anything, I would do like a warm compress, just to kind of keep the muscles a little bit looser so that you can stretch them a little bit more comfortably. I do have a video on it's suprahyoid muscle tension, but I think I might have called it dealing with tension underneath the chin or something. I do have a video that actually shows several stretches of the muscles, and I don't, were there massages? It was more stretches there. On the workshop that I did last week, I also did some massage, like some cross fiber massages that go through the muscles here. The thing with the voice is that our instruments are this complex system of muscles and other things, cartilage and what have you, and it's all connected. So those localized tensions and pains that we're experiencing in one part of our body, our tongue, I'm getting it right now, our tongues, for example, they're all connected to things. There's this snowball effect that tends to happen. So we can probably trace that tension down to somewhere else in the body. So very oftentimes, tensions in the jaw and the tongue are related to tightness in the neck. Very commonly, it's from a head forward posture. We're on our phones, we're on our laptops, we're reading books, and we're all doing it with this head forward. We sit in our vehicles with our heads forward, especially if you have a car seat like I have that forces the head forward. I actually took my headrest, spun it backwards, so because it was just forcing my head so far forward all the time, it was really uncomfortable. So when that happens, these muscles here become chronically stretched and overworked because they're doing all the work of holding the head up. And the more forward the head is, the more, like, the heavier it becomes, right? So we actually need to, even though we might be feeling, I feel like, like a lot of trapezius tension, scalenes, and those levator scapula muscles. I feel a lot of tensions back there. But the real problem actually is these muscles becoming chronically shortened. And so what I have to do in order to be able to get my head to align over my cervical spine correctly and to relieve these muscles of all the extra work they're having to do to compensate for that poor alignment, I actually have to stretch these muscles, the suprahyoid muscles and the neck muscles, all the way along here. And I have several exercises I said in that video on that. So it's all these muscles are like interwoven and they all affect each other pretty profoundly sometimes. And so we have to kind of do a little detective work and kind of follow the trail, so to speak, of where things start. Um, so yeah, if you're feeling these tensions in here, there's a good chance that these muscles are just chronically shortened because you may have a head forward posture like the majority of our population. So yeah, hopefully that helps. But check out that video. I am probably at some point going to post those videos of the workshops. Um, I'm thinking of what to do in terms of, yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to share that content while being fair to those who attended and paid for it. Let's just say that. So yeah, I'm trying to figure that out, make it accessible to those who weren't able to attend. Oh, attention. Oh yes, I already answered that. My girlfriend's got practically pitch perfect ears. Awesome. That's why I've been taking her advice. Yeah, and you can take her advice, I think, on things like, you know, pitch and whatever, like intonation, but unless she like really understands the intricate workings of the voice, then just you know, yeah, just bet what she says basically based on her understanding of the functional aspects of the voice. So I would caution you. But what does timbre actually mean? Oh yeah, so it's from the French word timbre. Some will print like spell it er in the U.S., but it's a French word, and it refers to the color of the voice, which is kind of also an equally confusing and vague definition. Um, Voice scientists feel like it really is the result of the higher overtones in the voice, more so than the lower, but it's really a combination of things too. So it's kind of like it's what distinguishes one voice from another in, like, when you're on the phone with somebody, right? So how do you know that this is John as opposed to Jake? Like, there's something different about their voices, even though they may be speaking in exactly the same pitch range. So it's kind of hard to describe, I guess, but it's a natural yeah, the natural part of your sound. Like, there are some voices that can be like, okay, a good example is like Adele, for example. She has this darker quality to her voice. So you could take her and a Natalie Imbruglia or somebody who's got a girlier, brighter voice, and they could be singing exactly the same pitch, and one just has more darkness and depth, and one has brightness, and that's partly a component of timbre. Um, it's kind of the color of the voice, bright, dark, but it's not necessarily something that we have a ton of control over, like the vowel formants. I don't know. It's really confusing. The color of the voice is kind of what we think of it as. Oh, good example is, so I remember when my husband was looking, we were looking at some custom drums and looking at just the different woods that can be used in creating that, and how you just tap on them and they have different timbres. They have like different qualities to them. That's kind of what it is with their voices. I don't know. I probably did a bad job of that. Let's see. In singing and mixed, which do you recommend to strengthen more, head voice or twang? Both. They are not mutually exclusive. So twang is a quality that can be added to any part of the range, while head voice is a functional thing. So head voice is really a product of vocal fold vibration and some other things, some resonance factors as well. But yeah, the if we're talking head voice in terms of M2, we'll say mode 2, it's really the vocal folds have a unique vibrational pattern that's different from M1, where we sing in chest voice. Some will say that part of head voice is also M1, but we won't argue registration today. I just don't have the strength, the fortitude for that. Let's see. So I would say, depending, I don't know what you sing, Nicholas. I think that would be really helpful if I knew what kind of music you like to sing, because if I were working with you, I'd be doing different things. You know, I approach it differently depending on the student's style. But twang is something that I have a student work on regardless of the style in which they sing. Um, but yeah, it depends, and it's a kind of a chicken or egg thing. Like, you know, I just feel like there needs to be some twang in head voice if you're singing contemporary styles, especially, but it also needs to be there when you're singing in classical styles, because otherwise the sound becomes very dull, and it becomes more difficult to sing those higher pitches in a healthy manner. So both, I'd say. I'm going to try and make my lower register my main voice from now on. Well, you know, Cockney, be careful with that, because again, it's one of those things. If it's not your happy place, if it's not your home, you kind of just go there for vacation and just go back home after a while. Because ultimately, what happens when you're singing in the wrong tessitura, that means like a range of pitches. When you're singing in the wrong tessitura for extended periods of time, and wrong in terms of your particular voice, your unique voice, it can cause premature wear and tear. Like it can cause your voice to have to work much harder, even if you're using proper technique. It's just, again, you kind of visit, don't live there. So I think it's great that you're focusing on chest voice and trying to build that. I think it's really important for you to do so, but don't do so to the neglect of your upper range, and don't do it to the point where you are wearing your voice out too much. Try it for the sake of working on chest. Reserve the falsetto range for harmonies. Yeah, and again, I mean, if you're comfortable singing it or whatever, that's fine. That's fine. I did the same with my car headset. I think I missed something there. Sorry. How to sing in perfect harmony. Sorry, I'm full of questions. Oh, thank you. I have 2 videos on how to sing harmony, but they're really more theoretical. And I did record the 3rd video, and is it 3rd video? Yeah, 3rd video. I recorded the 3rd video like twice and never got around to posting it. I do want to talk a little bit more about that, because actually I teach an a cappella singing class, and it's been a lot of fun. And this year I have a really great group of students who are all very, very knowledgeable about music theory and stuff. So it's been a lot of fun, and I'm actually thinking of starting an a cappella group locally here as part of like a class kind of thing. So perfect harmony. So I did talk about in those videos, Nicholas, and again, I would just check out those videos just for the sake of time. It's hard for me to get into all of that. I did talk about the theory of, you know, like, the different types of movements that we can have, oblique, parallel, so forth. And at the end of it, I did give some advice on learning to be able to listen differently to music. And that was something, because harmony was actually, it was a big struggle of mine. It's still not my strong suit. I've had to work very hard at trying to learn to find harmonies, because I tend to be like a sheep and I gravitate toward the lead melody. I've always been a lead singer, and so harmonies, I didn't grow up with a lot of music either. I think that made a difference. But I think some of the advice that I gave on there was to listen to more music that is very focused on multi-part harmony. Even just 2-part harmony is fine, but like I listen to like a lot of 50s and 60s music, and I do my best to try to sing more harmony than I sing lead now. When I'm at church, I try to sing along with the backing vocalist and not the lead singer, for example, when I'm not up there. And that makes a big difference, because I learn from them. I learn about how they're moving through, and how like sort of counterpoint, I guess we'll call it. And then the other thing is, learning to be able to play an instrument, just to be able to play chords and to be able to hear the different harmonic possibilities, to be able to pull out what's the tonic and what's the third and what's the fifth, and if you're doing a different type of chord, what's the seventh, what's the fourth, whatever chord you're playing there, learning to be able to just kind of play chords and to be able to identify them individually is also helpful. And there's so many different things that you can do, but I really think that learning to be able to be a good harmony singer really requires that you learn to listen to music a little bit differently and think a little bit differently about music. Um, it really, like for some of us, it really requires a lot of resistance to that temptation to sing lead, because the lead is fun, but it's the more I sing harmony, and again, I force myself to really sing harmony, the more I love it, the more I enjoy it, the more I realize how cool it can sound when you're doing these different parts. Um, yeah, it feels good, and you just know when you're on and when you're off. You know when things are just slightly off. There's just like clashing that happens. Um, so yeah, I would just encourage you to just really listen more, and even a barbershop and just a cappella music in general, learning to be able to hear different parts and singing different parts too. So don't just find one part. So if you listen to pentatonics, for example, my group always does a pentatonic song or two at Christmas time, and then we do different kinds of songs for our final performance in April. We do pentatonics, and it's usually 5 parts, and so learning to be able to sing different parts, like when I sing with my students, because I usually have to kind of fill in gaps. If somebody's singing, yeah, we mix up our parts a lot. We don't necessarily sing it exactly strictly how they do, because we've usually got more than 5 people. Um, but me, sometimes I have to sing soprano, and sometimes I have to sing the alto part, and sometimes I have to sing the tenor part. And learning to be able to hear from different places relative to the lead melody, learning to sing below the lead melody, learning to be able to sing above the lead melody, I think is also a really good exercise. So just the more you do it, the more your brain starts to adjust to that. I don't know if I'm missing a lot here. Let's see, my normal range is okay. Sorry, I always scream that happens. Oh, Cockney. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying necessarily your main one. I think that I would be curious to know what happens after you do really develop that part of your range instead of avoiding it, developing and seeing how that actually sits with your voice and your voice identity. You know what I mean? Like how you start to identify. Do you still identify as a countertenor, for example, or do you start to think, oh, maybe, maybe I've just been going up there because it's easier, it's lighter, whatever it might be. I think sometimes when it comes to voice types, we sort of pigeonhole ourselves a little bit, and we kind of we find what's comfortable now, so we just assume that that's what we are, and that may not be necessarily the case, especially if we just haven't developed all parts of our range. So I think it's really good, just like Matt trying to explore the lower part of his range instead of really focusing on the high range all the time, same thing, and trying to explore the more bassy aspects of his voice, and um, discovering what it tells you about your voice, like about you. Um, yeah, I think it's really important that we explore everything fully, is what I'm saying. So, in order to explore it fully, you have to really spend enough time to develop that part of the range. Voice is getting a lot better. See, I'm so glad to hear that, Phil. This Cockney's range. All right. Yeah, Cockney's got a good range there. Sorry, I don't know what the apologies are for. Oh, there I see. Janet, great info on here, especially about tensions, especially the super high end muscles. Yeah, Janet, you were at the both of the tensions workshop too. Ask really, what do you actually do to add a touch of nasality to help with going higher? Um, that's kind of a tricky one. So, um, I know for me, like what I've done in the past is I've kind of experimented with going from like hyper nasality to a non-nasal tone, and then what I do is I kind of go back and forth between the two, and then I settle in a place where it's like, oh, I can feel like it's resonating in here. I can feel maybe a tiny bit of air coming out of my nose, it's it's not enough to sound thin and nasal, if that makes sense. It's not, because we just have to learn to be able to at will open and close the nasal port. We have to learn to be able to feel that sensation. It's really one of those experiment things. Like you have to physically play around with it to know, because I mean, I know you, Janet, and I know that you know how to open the nasal port and close it. I know you know how to sing, with the nasal port closed and with it open for your nasal consonants. And so, learning to be able to just kind of um, do this, basically rubbing your tummy and patting your head is kind of what you're doing there. So yeah, it's about playing around. I had to play around with it to figure that out. Um, and then if you're unsure about whether or not it sounds thin and nasal, then you could just maybe record yourself, pick up your phone or another handheld device and just record and see what happens. Let's see, naturally baritone. I'm your musical opposite in that case, Karen. Oh, what do you mean? Did I miss something? Oh, I want to know. I'm all curious now. What do you mean by the musical opposite? Oh, yes, 50s and 60s. I love 50s and 60s. It's such good music, and again, it's just like lots of really good harmonies, and there was a lot more emphasis on harmony back then. But even now, like I think harmony is starting to kind of become a little bit more popularized again with all the acapella singing that's out there and with lots of acapella competitions and that sort of thing. It's becoming really kind of an in thing, a cool thing. You get lots of people on YouTube who are, who will. You've got one guy up on the screen who's like Brady Bunch style, and he's doing all the different parts. It's just becoming increasingly popular now. So I think people are starting to again develop an appreciation for harmony and for multi-part harmony. And so I think you're seeing more emphasis sometimes on harmony. I was listening, we were listening to the Greatest Showman soundtrack again. We listened to it a lot apparently, but there's actually a fair bit of harmony on that. So you've got some good duets in there, and learning to be able to, even if you're a guy, sing the female harmony, even if you have to go an octave lower or something like that, and just trying to gravitate toward that. I think it's really important. The Everly Brothers, I love the Everly. Oh, Simon and Garfunkel, I have their like definitive collection. I love, love, love Simon and Garfunkel, and the Beatles, of course. Um, musical opposite tend to gravitate toward the harmony. That's awesome. I have a friend. So when I used to lead worship, I used to lead worship at like the largest church in New England for a few years. And when I used to lead worship, she was this friend that I could just call on last minute, like really last minute, like somebody else was sick, or I'm like, I couldn't find somebody to sing backing, vocals, and I'd be like, hey Nicole, you want to come up? And she could sing songs that she'd never even heard before, and she could just come up with like a dozen different harmony parts. And it was amazing when we practiced for retreats, and we usually have more backing vocalists at the time. I didn't like it to sound too vocal group, because it's very contemporary, electric guitars and all that stuff. But she would be great at helping everybody find harmony parts, and like she was just so good. And we talked about this, and for her, she grew up with a mother who was actually a professional backing vocalist, and so she grew up with her mom singing harmonies all the time around the house. She never sang the lead, and so my friend just learned to be able to hear music differently. So again, I think when you start listening to a lot more really like strong harmony focused music, really good music that has a lot of really cool stuff going on vocally and harmonically. And when you start actually making it a point to practice that more, you become better at it. It may not still be, again, your wheelhouse. It may not be your strength, and you may struggle like I do with it. It just lack of musical training, I think. But you will. I'm a great testament to this. Like, you will get better, and you will start to be able to hear it, and you'll start to be able to pick up harmonies more readily, and you will start to anticipate where the music is going. That's one thing I've definitely found in the last year for me, especially. I can now anticipate, and I can now find where I need to go a lot more readily. And it's a skill. It's a skill like any other that can improve with practice and real intentional focus on it. Let's see. I don't consider myself a lead singer, and that's cool. Like my friend Nicole, same thing. She's just never been inclined to sing lead. She's not interested, but she's an awesome backing vocalist. Like you could just, like I said, she just don't even have to rehearse it. She's just right there, and she just hears it, and she just goes with it, and she just follows along, and she's amazing. Yes, I know Celine Dion. I am Canadian after all. I love playing with the harmonies and that. Yeah, see, that's awesome. I try to do it more. So, just something completely as an aside. So again, I teach this a cappella singing class, and the first two performance pieces is for Christmas. We did pentatonics songs, and I printed off sheet music that I had purchased. And so we learned it by sheet music. And then so what we usually do is we try to do that for the Christmas performance. And for the final performance in April, we usually try to learn by rote. Um, and so we're learning one song by rote, and it's already an a cappella arrangement. And then the other song, we're actually taking a full worship band. This is a Christian group, a full worship band, a song, a new worship song, and it's got guitars and drums and bass and all of the the full band stuff. And we're coming up with our own arrangement. And it's amazing having a group of singers who actually are a little bit more vocally capable. They're not trained singers, but they are more vocally capable than some of the past classes I've taught. And they're all musicians. And two of the guys in the group are brothers, and they write their own music and they perform at like coffee houses and stuff. And it's amazing just like to be able to work with this group of tweens and teens, because they just like within the first 55-minute class we already had a good solid simple but really nice sounding arrangement of this song. And it was amazing how everybody can just get their parts, and I was finding it was like really easy to pick up the harmony parts, and it was pretty exciting. um, Anyway, I'm all excited about that class. I can't wait to hear the final product of it. It's going to be really a lot of fun. Let's see. Jessica, your videos are so helpful to understand more about the mechanics. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad they're helpful. Oh, sorry. I just shook this whole thing. I agree. Oh, good. I think we are almost at the end of the questions. Jessica's got one, and I think we're going to call it a day, and then I'm going to go spend some time with my puppy and my kids. See, I have a strong head voice with decent resonance, but when I try to sing in my chest voice, it sounds so forced. It doesn't have that ringing quality that my head voice does. What can I do to improve? It's so dry in here. We keep a humidifier going, but it's still really dry in here the last few days. I think the heaters are working overtime because it's only been in the teens outside up here in the Northeast. All right, so I would say, I'm going to assume, Jessica, that you're a soprano. I'm going to assume. Tell me if I'm entirely off base here. In which case, that's kind of, yeah, your sweet spot is up probably a little bit higher, right? So when you come down to chest voice, it's probably a little bit of a struggle. I know I work with a soprano right now who, well, she's kind of a budding soprano. We're trying to figure out if she's more like high mezzo or low soprano. And what she used to do is she would carry, yes, okay, good. So she would carry her M2, her mode 2, her higher head voice mechanism down as low as she could. And then when she crossed below about middle C, she would falsely, my dog's groaning, sorry. She would falsely darken the timbre, and she would just go, oh, and she, sorry, my dog is groaning because she wants to come in. All right, so she would falsely darken it. It would sound really dull and lackluster because she thought that's what chest voice was. And so make sure that you're in chest voice. Make sure that you're actually in M1, first of all. That's really important because a lot of sopranos have difficulties accessing it when they're singing. They tend to, again, carry M2 down. Chest voice feels horrible, yeah. So I wonder, yeah. So I love to just add twang, but the first thing you want to make sure is you're accessing M1. Okay, so if you're not accessing it, then you're not going to be able to work on it, right? So when you're down there, learning to be able to not push, I think, is really important, especially if you're used to being stronger up on the higher end of your range. When you come down, your voice is going to get a little bit lighter. I'm not a soprano, but I am a light, like a lyric mezzo. And when I go down in my chest voice range, it's not the most powerful part of my range. And if I try to make it powerful, if I try to push and force and try to really dig in, it doesn't feel good and it doesn't sound good. And so I've learned to kind of work smarter, not harder. I've learned to work with the instrument that I've got instead of trying to pretend that it's something that it's not. So twang has been extraordinarily beneficial. And again, I've got that twang workshop coming up this week, Thursday and Sunday. same content, just 2 different days, 2 different times for you guys. But when you're bringing the twang down, it's, you know, just that, if you did like a yeah, 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 it's just that bright sound, yeah, wah, right? That little baby's cry sound. Like, you don't have to go all the way wah to that really, really bright twangy sound. But if you bring that down, yeah, 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 yeah. So I'm able to resonate my voice because of the brightness from the twang, without me having to go yeah, and really digging in, really pushing. It was something I learned a number of years back, that just trying to push through that is not healthy and it's not comfortable for me. So I would just say, you know, adding a little bit of twang. I do have several videos on twang here on YouTube, and you might be able to find something that can help you. I've got tons of exercises on those videos as well. So I would start with that. I would start with trying to achieve the brightness, assuming that you actually are in chest voice, are in M1. Yeah, that's really the best thing I think that you can do. You can work through, some people do really well with NGs through there to try to get that feeling of things being kind of happening here instead of the pushing from the throat. I would almost say, see, I haven't heard you. Sometimes it's better to start down lower to make sure that you're in chest voice and you're not just bringing head voice down. And sometimes it works better if you start up higher and then cross into chest so you can feel and hear the difference. You know, with an NG, I mean, you can just do even like a third slide or slide like a fifth. And focus on that really bright resonance, that feeling of acoustic energy, strong acoustic energy in here. And that will generally alleviate the pressures and tensions that you feel here. But of course, there's the issue of the breath. Straw work may help through there to kind of get you to regulate the breath pressures. If you can do lip or tongue tip trills or through there, that might be helpful too, because it helps you to thin the vocal folds in a way that you might be more accustomed to, up a little higher. So that's a helpful twang, is something I'm working on. Oh, good, yeah. You know, Jessica, I would love to see you at the workshop too, because we're going to work through, like, as a group and individually, if you're really interested in learning more about it, versus a more twangish. Let's see, can you tell if you were truly M1? Versus, yeah, you can, but I think it's one of those things you have to. Are you discussing? Sorry, I'll get back to you, Cornelius, in a second. Ooh. Sorry.
I heard crunch. I looked down.
All right, I think it's safe to say that's trash. It's not going to be of any use to you. Go throw it in the trash, please. I'm wrapping up here.
Wait.
Sorry. So yeah, so there is a different feeling. Like, chest voice has been called chest voice because we feel vibrations here. I don't personally feel vibrations there unless my hand is physically on my chest. But there is, if you speak in M1, it's really at speech level. I have worked with a few students over the years, not a lot, but a few, who actually, female students who speak in M2. So they never access that M1 until we start to work on it. I love doing like humming and accessing that. It feels different. It feels different in weight. It feels different to me how the vocal folds connect. But yeah, you have to kind of experiment with that a little bit, I think, to figure that out, whether or not you truly are in M1 or M2. So yeah. Straw phonation. Good. Yeah, I have a video on that topic as well. All right, Cornelius, where was your question? Are you discussing head vibrations? Yeah, I'm talking more about like when you're singing through like a nasalized sound that's in like an M, N, or NG in English, or even like the nasal. I use nasal vowels as another. I didn't mention that earlier, but I have a video on French nasal vowels that you may find helpful. It's really great for helping through the passaggio. Oh, and Janet, that kind of answers your question too about how do you learn to be able to get just a little tiny bit of nasal port opening. French nasal vowels are also good. Learning to be able to sing through those, which feels weird if you're not used to speaking in French. I grew up speaking French, so it's a little bit different for me, but that would also be another really useful tool through there. So yeah, we're talking more about like when you're singing through, with the nasal port open intentionally, that feeling of just strong acoustic energy that you get through the nose because you're filtering resonance and air through it. Let's see, Cornelius. I've heard it said that a very high closed quotient, excuse me, will result in so powerful upper overtones that they will cause sympathetic vibrations in the bony structures of the head. Yes. I mean, I think you can get it without it being even a strong sound, but the stronger the sound source signal, so the more compression, glottal compression we have, and the more compression we have, the longer the closed quotient. That closed quotient is the ratio, that the amount of time that the vocal folds are touching during each vibratory cycle when they open and close, right? So a higher or longer closed quotient means that they're touching for longer, they're making contact for longer during each cycle. So they're kind of sitting there and then opening and closing and opening and closing. That's very slow motion. And yes, so the stronger that compression and longer the closed quotient, yes, the louder that sound source signal, so the initial sound that's coming from the vocal fold vibration, yes, you're right. And the louder that sound source signal is, the louder all of the overtones are going to be. So then what determines whether or not those higher overtones are going to be augmented is really in how we're shaping and how we're tuning the resonance. We want to ultimately align the formants with the harmonics. Way too much for today. I have talked about a little bit about resonance tuning and formants in other videos before. Check out the twang workshop. Yeah, it's if you go to Jessica, if you go to singwise.com/workshops, you can find out more information about that. But it'd be great to have you. Let's see. I know I said I was done, and then it's like you guys started bombarding me with questions. Cornelius, I recently found this study about nasalins. Apparently, raising the velum will not by itself remove nasalins, but result in a coronal opening of the velopharyngeal port. Yeah, so I was doing some research on this a few years ago, and I learned that there are actually 4 different shapings or mechanisms that humans use depending on their particular unique anatomical structures when it comes to closing the nasal port. And so there are different ways to do it. Some do it more soft palate, some do it more, pharyngeal. It's, so there are different, we are not all exactly alike in how we do certain things. And so I think, yeah, we just have our own unique anatomical structures that make us us. And that's kind of cool too. So let's see, Cockney, how do you learn to sing in accents other than your own? I don't know. I've always been good with languages, so I've always kind of just listened to just even in speech, learning to, when you're learning a new language, for example, learning to be able to, if you're not talking languages or you're talking accents, learning to be able to hear the little nuanced aspects of the language of a native speaker. Vowels are really important because how they pronounce certain vowels are not necessarily how we pronounce certain vowels. Yeah. I don't know. I just kind of really doing a good solid study, I think, of what they do, and also like inflection and things like that. A lot of languages have different types of inflection. Whether they rise or fall in at the end of sentences, for example. Let's see. If you have no nasalins, it means the side walls are approximated, resulting in a smaller pharynx. Do you want a raised velum but still a bit of nasalins? So, yeah, and I think, I don't know if you were here earlier, Cornelius, but I was talking about Johan Sundberg's work with his colleagues that he's currently has been studying for some time now, nasalins, and its benefits actually going through the passaggio in particular, because it creates that positive interaction between the vocal fold vibration and the supraglottic resonance. And so he actually suggests, as some have in the past, he's not the first to suggest it, of course, but he suggests that if you actually let the nasal port slightly open to allow a little bit of nasalins, but not enough to actually create perceptible nasality, that creates that positive interaction and can make it better. We know from linguists that in rapid speech, the soft palate can't go up and down and fully seal off the nasal port perfectly. But in singing, we do have to be a little bit more mindful of that, because yeah, we don't generally want to have perceptible nasality in our tones. So we just have to figure out how to find that in between zone where we have just enough to make it easier for us to transition through registers, but not enough to thin and such. Or a Canadian accent. Okay, I'm sure I missed something there. Mm-hmm. Like if I wanted to learn to sing in an Aussie accent, for instance. So you'd have to listen to an Aussie speaker, but if you listen to a lot of Australian singers, they don't, their accents don't betray them. They sound very Americanized, just like a lot of UK singers sound like Adele again. They sound very Americanized, and that's partly just they've learned to be able to mimic in some ways, kind of like the opposite of what you're trying to do. So yeah, I think you just have to learn some of the little nuances, like how there are certain ways. I know several Australians. There's certain ways that they pronounce their vowels, for example. And if you could learn to pronounce your vowels that way, then that would actually go a long way in getting you to sound more like an Aussie. Um, Northern British one. See, you'd have more luck with the Northern British since you're so close in proximity, compared to me at least. I know you're in the South. Canadian one. See, I don't want to copy. So it's so funny because being a Canadian, when I hear Canadians on TV or something, it's just like really, it just it sounds foreign to me. And when I go back to Canada, everybody sounds so strange. I know some people still say I have a little bit of a Canadian accent in me. But all right, Jessica, thumbs up. You're welcome. I don't know what that means. All right, Jessica, your name rings a bell. Let's see. Janet, when is the twang workshop? Janet, it's Thursday, I think at 2:30 Eastern time, so that's going to be 7:30 for you. And the other one is at 4 o'clock. I think it's at this time next Sunday. Um, so either way, it'll be evening for you. Um, check on the regional accents are fun. Yeah, some people are really good with accents. I am good with languages that I've studied, but I'm not good with like very specific regional accents. It's also something I just haven't spent enough time really focusing on. It's not priority. um, Cornelius, oh, you weren't at the beginning. Yeah, working on an assignment about modernist music and fun. Is this like a master's, like a graduate work, or is this like undergrad, or what is it? Are those Q&A sessions on a fixed schedule? I would love to be here earlier. Yes, so I do it the second Sunday of every month at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern. I am going to start soon, in the next week or two. I'm going to start popping on a little bit more, kind of probably impromptu live streams. I'm not necessarily going to schedule them. I'm just going to look at when I have openings in my teaching schedule and maybe pop on during the week. It'll probably be afternoon for me. So if you're in the UK, it'll be evening. If you're in the US or North America, it'll be sometime in the afternoon, probably during my regular work hours. But I'm going to do that because I know that these ones can get quite long. We've gone as long as like an hour and 40 minutes or something before, which is a lot. It's a lot for all of us to kind of work through. I mean, I enjoy it, but it'd be nice if I could break up those questions and let you guys be able to ask questions in smaller spurts. And I think it would be maybe easier for people who haven't been here to be able to get through the content after the fact. Just feel free to watch it in like times two or times 1.5, whatever you can tolerate. Let's see. Pretty rough, haha, first year in my historical musicology class. Okay. Majoring in music at Copenhagen. Oh, nice. Ever felt. Oh, okay. All right. I think I'm going to take. This is the last question I'm going to take. Time zone difference. Okay. So Cockney, you're in the UK, so you're 5 hours difference. You're 5 hours ahead of me. Um, Ever felt. So again, last question. How is the vibrato that, for example, Sarah Vaughan and Ella Fitzgerald do at the end of phrases done? I haven't listened to them in a while, so I'd have to listen. I would say describe it for me. I'm just trying to think. I don't really want to go open up a new tab and listen to it here. Like I said, okay. I'm trying to picture the vibrato specifically. Like I hear kind of timbral, but like, hmm. Are you talking about sort of, are they sustaining and then adding vibrato at the end? I'm not sure. Regardless, um, when it comes to vibrato, it really requires flexibility and like a degree of agility. So if you are kind of holding tensions and if you're really being very rigid about your how you're using your voice, that's going to prevent vibrato from coming out. I do believe that vibrato is just a natural component of our singing when everything's kind of in place and in balance. So, in order to have control over the vibrato, whether you want it to be faster or slower, or sustained throughout the entire phrase, or if you only wanted to add it to the very end of a sustained tone, um, you have a degree of control over that. But in order to exercise that control, you have to actually have balance in it. Let's see. Apparently, straight tone singing is the result of vibrato that is fast enough to melt into a single perceptual frequency. There are different theories on that. There are different theories because some also feel as though that it's that the vibrato is suppressed in straight tone singing. I wouldn't say that it's overly fast. I don't know if we could really, when we hear a good vibrato, not one that's like very wide swinging, for example, like a wobble. There is this sense. So vibrato is basically you've got this fundamental frequency that you're perceptually the listener is hearing, but then we go above and below that pitch, right, when we're singing. Um, Usually quarter tone to half a tone on either direction. Quarter tone is better, no more than a full like a semitone between. And what happens is the brain does indeed fuse that together so that all we really perceive is this fundamental frequency. So that's why it doesn't sound like we're off in pitch when we're using vibrato. The brain just kind of fuses it all together. All right, let's see. Yeah, I've discussed vibrato in some live streams before and such about other classical singers. Yeah, classical singers don't all have wide swinging vibratos. They can be a little bit wider than we may hear in some contemporary styles. I think that's partly stylistic, that there are certain vibrato sounds that are more acceptable in certain cultures as well. So, yeah, I think some of it's stylistic, some of it could be technical. Let's see, Cornelius. Oh, more comments. Okay, vibrato. I keep wanting to like wrap up. All right, so much conversation. Vibrato is some sort of complex aerodynamic phenomenon. You can sort of adjust the balance slightly. Yeah. So I know like I've talked about vibrato before, and I know like Ingo Titze talks about it as being like possibly like a tonic flutter, where the muscles alternate between working and resting, and there's so many different theories, and it's one of those things that despite all the research that we've done in on vibrato, like we still don't fully understand it. By we, I mean voice scientists, and I am not one of them. But it's one of those amazing phenomena that just like yeah, it's fun. All right, let's see. All right, we can adjust the speed. Fair enough. All right, twang workshops. Oh, yay, Jessica. You just signed up for the twang workshop. Excellent. Well, I look forward to meeting you. I'll send you an email with the link soon, okay? If not today, then tomorrow. Cornelius, I think the year that actually, okay. Trying to work through it. Cornelius, I love how well researched, well read you are. I love that. Janet, which one do you think we'll do? I started singing with just head voice and had to learn to sing in chest voice. Yeah, Janet, I mean, I would call you a soprano. So it makes sense that head voice is kind of your thing, and chest voice requires more active work. I don't know what you mean by which one do you think we'll do. I'm not sure what you mean, Janet. Barbra Streisand is the queen. Greetings from Spain. Hi, Adam. We're just wrapping up. I'm sorry. I'm trying to wrap up. Greetings from Spain. I have seen all your videos. Oh, I'm so glad it's been helpful. All right, and Cornelius, I'm one of Charles Robert Armstrong's students. Oh, okay. I know him. Yeah, he's a fun guy. Good. That's good to know. Yeah, he's very much into like linguistics, and he likes voice science too, so that's good. Did you interacted with him? Yeah. So I did that last spring. I did that series of 7 questions for singing teachers, and he was able to answer one of the later questions, second to last one or last one. He popped on, and I think he was out at a bar or something, or club or something, and he recorded his video part. It was kind of funny. I'm asking. Oh, Jessica. Oh, okay. All right. How's your music teacher training? Okay, good. I'm gonna end here before we have any more questions that pop up. But it's been really good hanging out with you guys. It's been really nice actually having kind of a smaller group today, so it makes things more manageable. You signed up for Sunday. All right, so we'll see you in a week, Jessica. All right, guys. If you have any other questions that pop up, just feel free to leave them in the comment section after this video is posted by YouTube. Otherwise, you can always message me on the Singwise Facebook page or email me at karyn@singwise.com, KARYN@singwise.com. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have yourselves a really nice rest of the day or evening. All right. Bye, guys.